Japan is an amazing place to live, including for software engineers, but it's definitely not for everyone. If your expectations or reasons to move here aren't the right reasons, you're on the road to burnout, resentment, and a one way ticket back home. After 8 years in Japan, I've seen a lot of people, friends, coworkers, move back home after a scant few years, and it usually comes down to a few types of personality or expectation mismatches, and that's what I'll be talking about today. So, to get into it, type number one people who are escaping some kind of misery. Some people frankly hate where they're at in life for a variety of reasons. And, I've been there, bad work situations, difficult emotional and mental situations. The list, the possibilities are endless for why someone is not happy with where they're at in life. There are absolutely valid reasons to move countries to escape bad situations. Things like an unpromising local economy, political unrest, getting out of dangerous geopolitical zones. But for the most part, these should be external factors, right? These should not be things that are kind of intrinsic to you and that are personal to you. And moving to a country where you have mismatches from the culture to the language to simple expectations like what you can find in the grocery store, as well as dealing with the infamous Japanese bureaucracy, social difficulties, it's going to take a lot of energy, determination, and drive. And it's really hard to summon that kind of energy, determination, and drive whenever you have these internal kind of things that you are battling. And so if you're just trying to escape misery, geography is not therapy. So please reconsider in that case. Type number two, net worth maximizers. So in the US, there are entire sub-economies dedicated to maximizing the advantages you get for your $1. There are things like credit card churning, there's high yield savings accounts, there's 401ks and Roth IRA strategies, there's like backdoor IRAs and all kinds of other stuff, healthcare savings accounts, whole host of videos showing just how many things you can do to maximize the dollar that you get in the US. In Japan, we have almost none of that. So credit card benefits are pretty minimal. Savings accounts kind of max out at like a sub 1% interest, and that's typically for like closed deposit accounts. So they're in there for a certain amount of time and you can't take them out without a penalty. Retirement plans are limited to the national pension and defined contribution plans, which have limited flexibility compared to like a 401k. Like you can't take out a loan against your pension or your defined contribution plans, so on. More or less, there are not the same kind of economies for maximizing your yen as there are in the US for maximizing your dollar. And then on top of that, like the market is just smaller and kind of has a lower general ceiling. There are far fewer companies in Japan that need like staff and principal level US big tech engineers. And even then, for example, a senior software engineer at Google is making something like 200K base in Seattle, according to Levels FYI. But a senior level 5 at Google is making the equivalent of like 200K total in Tokyo, and that's including bonuses and RSUs. At higher career levels, the net worth math just doesn't really make sense for Japan if net worth and like that number, the number in your bank account is the only thing that really matters. Of course, I made a video on kind of like how 180K in San Francisco kind of matches like a 100K salary in Tokyo. So there is also that to consider, like the purchasing power of your lower bank account. But if you just want a bigger number, Japan is really not the place to be. And type number three, I'm going to perhaps derogatorily call this the savior complex. And so Japanese tech, gets a lot of flack. The internet's going to tell you that like fax machines are a daily use item. Web design here is cluttered and terrible, and every company is still using PHP 3. I'm going to go on a little rant here. For one, fax machines are also a daily use item in the US for specific industries like healthcare, which is pretty much how they are in Japan. Personally, I've never used a fax machine even after 8 years here in Japan. For another, web design effectiveness is really culture dependent. Like Japanese consumers are far happier getting extremely dense web pages of information than they are getting minimalist, vibes focused US style pages that, you have to like navigate through to several different clicks in order to find out what exactly the product does. And that's not something that Japanese customers are really on board with. And then as for PHP, the last time I wrote PHP was in the US. So checkmate. Small rant out of the way. Japanese tech does have problems, like there are, I've had to open password or open encrypted documents that have a password sent in a separate email. Like there are actual problems that Japanese technology does have, and like the Japanese culture or Japanese tech culture has some issues. But these are also the same kind of issues that you will find in the U.S. Like companies not knowing how to encrypt emails is not a Japan specific problem. That happens in the U.S. too. Um, but it's also just kind of in general, it's extremely important to consider the reason that things are the way that they are. Like for the web design aspect, Japan has marketing and consumer happiness trends, and companies, that spend and make a lot of money on the business of knowing that, so that they can consult to companies that are producing these web pages, and then they can make the most effective web page. You can't seriously think that they're all just stupid and have never looked at a US web page. Like that's not how a senior engineer would look at this problem. And real senior engineer would look at the problem as, how did this become the way that it is, and then start from there. Type number 4 is people who just want to be in the expat safety bubble. It's very possible to live in Japan only interacting with other English speakers, but if you can't really have any kind of conversation with Japanese people, or you don't want to, then it's going to be hard to do things like find apartments. It's going to be hard to navigate City Hall, socializing at tech events with non-English speakers, because a lot of Japanese people do show up to these like tech events, to practice their English. But they're practicing their English, and so it's they can't always communicate as effectively as as you can with a native English speaker. And so ultimately, you're going to hit the limits of that bubble really fast. It'll be hard to make friends. It'll be hard to find next jobs. If you come here for a perfectly, like an English first job, and then you want to find another job, do you really want to limit your options that much? It'll just be hard to access everything. And having tourist level Japanese won't be enough to do things like start a company or get a housing loan without paying an extreme premium for literally everything. Whenever I got my housing loan, the bank called me in Japanese, and we had to have a conversation in Japanese to make sure that they knew that I could like understand and speak Japanese well enough to understand what I was actually doing. And so, everything just becomes a lot harder if you restrict yourself to, if you don't take the time to like learn the language to some degree of like integration level ability. And type number 5, if you are a remote only purist, it is going to be very difficult to find those jobs in Japan. Companies did become more flexible after COVID, but in 2026, hybrid is kind of the new standard. And full remote roles, while they do exist, are a lot harder to come by these days. Just for one example, Mercari had full remote as recently as last year, but now they too have returned to office and predominantly limit their engineering hires to Tokyo. And so that is another thing to think about. You could be limiting your job options by as much as 70 to 80% if you are only about full remote. And then type number 6. Yeah, that's 6. Is the stereotype chaser. So sometimes people move here looking for a Japan that's been built up by stereotypes in media. They're looking for maybe an overly polite and subservient culture. They're looking for omotenashi, that concept to be everywhere in their life. They're looking for a cyberpunk playground of advanced technology. That one is kind of starting to fade a little bit. That's not as much of a stereotype anymore. And, people make fun of it like they do people make fun of Japan for using fax machines and stuff, which again, have my own problems with that. But, and then, another common stereotype is like anime on every television screen. And, Japan is a lot of things. And that's exactly why looking for a Japan that is just a stereotype or just a collection of stereotypes is just not going to work out. That's not, you can't move countries without being challenged on pretty close to everything that you've ever believed. And, that's hard enough without being weighed down by, being challenged on these expectations that Japan will never hope to match because they don't, it's a stereotype. To bring it all together, as I said in the intro, Japan is an amazing place to live, but it is not a paradise. Every country has trade-offs, and Japan's trade-offs are more of a deal breaker for some people, and there is nothing wrong with that. I want to emphasize that if if you listen to this video, or for other reasons you think that Japan is just not the right place for you to live, that's okay. That's fine. That's you don't have to live in Japan. Japan is, it's a great place to travel to if you love Japanese food, Japanese cities, Japanese culture. Like, it's a great place to travel to if you want to do that, and but don't think that you could live here. That all said, if you're a software engineer who's still thinking about moving here, even after this video, even after thinking about it some more, please feel free to send me an email at steven@rebasedjapan.com, and we can chat about the best way to get you here. So if you have any questions about the tech scene in Japan, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.